Hello. Good evening. Hello. Yeah, so like to welcome everybody to our Planning Commission meeting. This is the comprehensive plan update and public hearing for October the 2nd. If we can all stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hey. Quick roll call. Commissioner Packard.
Present.
And Commissioner Davis, Jennifer Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Dewar.
Here.
Commissioner Huxford.
Here,
And if we can get a motion to excuse Commissioner Morton.
so moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moves. That moves us to any guest business. If anybody has anything any public comment outside of what would address the public hearing. Any comment?
Oh, yes, I will go grab some.
So yeah, any guest business that doesn't involve the public hearing. All right. That moves us on to approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Everybody get the opportunity to take a look at that. Any amendments? Concerns?
I saw none.
Okay. Get a motion to approve.
Oh, someone.
And
So
I'll
moved.
second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so moved. That brings us to action item 5 is the public hearing. You get a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor? There you go. And with that, I'll turn it over to Planning Manager Levitan.
All right. Thank you, Chair, Commissioners, David Levitan, Senior Planner. So I am going to give a brief PowerPoint. I know that there are a fair number of new people here tonight, so welcome. Just wanted to start with a brief overview of the comp plan update process and then identify some of the changes that are proposed as part of the 2024 comprehensive plan. I'm assuming several of you, if not most of you, are here related to some of the land use and zoning map amendments. So I'll provide some additional context on that as far as some of the map amendments that are specifically proposed to increase our employment and housing capacity to meet state mandated growth targets. And then there are several that are proposed more as housekeeping amendments. So we'll kind of differentiate between those two as we get into the presentation. All right. So just a little bit on the meeting agenda. As I just mentioned, I'm going to give a little bit on the process overview, highlight some of the public and agency comments that we've received. For those of you that have not provided written comments, you are welcome to continue to provide those written comments through the City Council public hearing. This is a Type 6 land use amendment, so it requires a public hearing before the Planning Commission, who then makes a recommendation to City Council on potential adoption. And then the City Council holds their own separate public hearing that is currently scheduled for October 22nd. So there will be an opportunity for public comment, oral testimony at that meeting as well. But you're welcome to continue to submit written comments. I'll talk a little bit about changes made to the public review draft of the plan, which was issued back on July 26th, and then highlight again some of the map amendments, answer any questions from commissioners, and then there will be an opportunity for public comment after my presentation. Time permitting, opportunity for some initial commission discussion, and then staff's recommendation is to continue the public hearing to October 9th and to keep the public comment portion open. So that would allow for continued written comments and then also for members of the public to provide oral testimony at the October 9th special meeting as well. So just a little bit about comprehensive planning. So for those that have not been part of the process, this is a process that we're required to go through. It's a state mandated periodic update. Historically, it's been every 7 or 8 years. The Growth Management Act, which is what provides kind of the state foundation for land use planning, has been revised recently. Now we're required to update the plan through this process every 10 years. So we won't be mandated to do this again until 2034 as far as adoption. We are required to update the plan by December 31st of 2024. That includes both local adoption by the City Council and then certification by the Department of Commerce and by Puget Sound Regional Council. So they evaluate it against the Growth Management Act and then against Vision 2050, which is kind of the regional plan for the 4-county region of Central Puget Sound. And as I mentioned, it needs to be reviewed and kind of certified by both the Department of Commerce and Puget Sound Regional Council. So just a little bit about the process that we've undertaken over the last year plus. So started really kind of with public engagement back in the summer of 2023, community events, surveys, periodic check-ins with the Planning Commission and City Council. Kind of moved into policy and plan development, so really getting into the narrative and the policy development. So that started really in kind of winter and spring of 2024, so just about 8-9 months ago. Basically, we're holding work sessions with the Planning Commission at least monthly, if not twice a month, to review draft policy language, to talk about topics that needed to be addressed in the plan, to discuss statutory requirements that need to be addressed in the plan. So that all led into the release of the public review draft of the complete plan, as well as proposed map amendments. So that was issued on July 26th, was released on the city website via social media, to the email list that we had for the project, sent out to agencies, to tribes, basically to solicit public and agency comment so that we could incorporate revisions into the public hearing draft, which is what was released as part of the packet for tonight's meeting. We are now getting into the adoption public hearing process. So as I mentioned, the Planning Commission for these type 6 legislative amendments, basically that amend the comprehensive plan or that propose concurrent zoning map amendments, that were required to hold a public hearing before the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission then makes a recommendation to City Council. The City Council holds a separate public hearing and then ultimately can adopt the comprehensive plan via ordinance, as well as any associated zoning map amendments. So that's where we're at tonight. Just to provide a little bit on especially really what went into the map amendments that are being proposed is really each jurisdiction in the state of Washington is allocated growth targets, basically how many jobs, how many people, how many housing units we need to plan for over the next 20 years. So following a collaborative process with other jurisdictions in Snohomish County, the city was allocated growth targets of 9,614 new residents. That's between the year 2020 and 2044. Another approximately 3,219 jobs, and then just shy of 5,000 housing units. And again, this is backdated to the year 2020. So the city has continued to experience growth between 2020 and 2024. So we do get credit for that growth. Just very briefly on this, how must the city plan? Really, Puget Sound Regional Council, through their Vision 2050 document, establishes a regional growth strategy for Central Puget Sound. We're required to be, our plan is required to be consistent with that. It needs to address the Growth Management Act, which provides at the state level how comprehensive planning is done. And so there's all sorts of goals and rules and regulations related to comprehensive planning, and we need to demonstrate compliance with that. There are a number of specific topics that have really kind of been high priorities in recent legislative sessions, and which have led to amendments to the Growth Management Act. These include things like climate change adaptation, meeting housing needs at all income levels. And that's really a big one. And that's a big one that is driving a lot of the proposed map amendments and some of the kind of the ones specifically related to increasing our supply of multifamily residential housing that is potentially affordable at lower income levels. It used to be that we just had one growth target. We had to plan for that. It didn't matter the income levels. But the Growth Management Act was amended back in 2021 to require cities to plan for the needs of their entire community. And so that there are specific income bands as a percentage of area median income that we need to plan for. And that's really driving some of the changes. There's not a whole lot of major changes. We're needing to add a couple hundred units of extra capacity for potentially lower income units. That kind of is much lower than a lot of the cities that say are located along I-5 or along light rail that have been allocated much higher growth targets. So, but it's a change. And so we understand that there might be some concerns about those. Some of the other things that we need to plan for that have been amended in the Growth Management Act are evaluating what are called racially disparate impacts, basically impediments based on race or ethnicity, kind of exploring the history of that and what has led to those and what some potential policy or regulatory solutions are. And also, as we're proposing these map amendments, we need to be cognizant of potential displacement of existing residents and businesses from redevelopment of property. So we need to address that in the comp plan. And then finally, equity is a major component of the plan and something that we really need to address through this planning process. So I'm not going to get into this too much, but this is basically the housing income bands that we're required to plan for. So we're allocated those approximately 4,900 units, and then those are broken down by income level. So 0 to 30% of area median income would be considered extremely low. So say a family of four, the average median income in Snohomish County for a family of four is $150,000. 30% would be basically $30,000. Sorry, would be $45,000. And so that is obviously can be difficult to plan for. So we need to both provide the zoning framework and then also some of the policy framework to try to accommodate those housing needs. There are specific housing unit types that are assigned to each income level. So the assumptions are that between 0 and 80% of area median income, that most of that growth needs to be accommodated through multifamily housing, such as apartments or condominiums. You then look at, as you move left to right, you get into 100 to 120% of AMI. The assumption is that most of that is going to be met through what's called middle housing, basically things between larger apartments and detached single-family residences. So that would be comprised of duplexes, triplexes, townhomes. And then our largest allocation, about half of our allocation, is at 120% or above of area median income. So that would be basically for a family of four, that would be $180,000 or more of family income. So the assumption on those units is that they would be provided primarily through detached single-family residences. So the plan is what we're here tonight to hold the public hearing on. That's attachment 4 in tonight's meeting packets. So it includes an introduction as well as 9 elements. Elements are basically chapters that address different topics: land use, housing, parks and recreation, environment and natural resources, economic development, utilities and public services, transportation, and capital facilities. So as I noted earlier, we issued a public review draft back on July 26. We've received a number of public and agency comments over the last couple months that have been incorporated into the public hearing draft of the plan. We had deliberately published the Planning Commission version, so tonight's version, as a track changes version so that we could document the changes that had been made to the public review draft that was issued 2 months ago. When the Planning Commission forwards a recommendation to City Council, the City Council will be presented with a clean version for potential adoption by city ordinance. So for those of you that have reviewed the packets, and if you haven't, happy to provide you with that link or know where that can be found in advance of next week's proposed continued public hearing So there were a number of public comments that were provided in the packet. Those can be found in attachment 2, which are pages 10 to 36, and that's of the packet, not of the document. So PP is packet page. So PP 10 through 36 are public comments. And then we also received comments from 8 different agencies, including Commerce, Puget Sound Regional Council, Department of Fish and Wildlife, Department of Natural Resources, Department of Transportation, the Sewer District, Lake Stevens School District, and then Puget Sound Partnership. And as I noted, we've made a number of revisions that are shown as track changes in the public hearing draft of the comprehensive plan. So just to highlight a couple of the changes, didn't want to try to highlight every single item, but you can go through the document and you would see them as track changes. So just some of the general changes that were made. Since the public review draft was issued, the city has prepared what's called a SEPA environmental checklist. So SEPA is the State Environmental Policy Act. This would be considered what's called a non-project action. So we're not evaluating any specific development, but we have to assess potential cumulative environmental impacts of this non-project action. So what would be the potential impacts of the map amendments, of some of the policy changes? We need to review that holistically and then issue what's called a threshold determination. And so that was issued on September 23rd and has been added as Appendix A to the plan. That's packet pages 410 through 435. One of the other items that responded to comments both from the public as well as specifically from the Department of Commerce and the Puget Sound Regional Council, the city, as we prepare our map amendments or assess our capacity to meet our growth targets, we're required to do what's called a land capacity analysis. So that's included on pages 436 to 441. The primary focus of that, just given our projected deficits for lower income housing bans, has been on how we are going to accommodate those, what some potential zoning map amendments would be. So those are map amendments that are specifically tied to increasing our capacity at certain income levels. As I'll get into a little bit later, there's a series of other map amendments that were basically housekeeping map amendments. They're not intended to increase capacity. For example, the Timbers development up in the northern part of the city was approved under basically a contract zoning designation that doesn't exist anyplace else in the city, called multifamily development agreement. There's really no need to maintain that. So we were looking for the closest corresponding zoning designation for the Timbers, which is RA12, which is primarily intended for small lot detached single family residential. The Timbers is pretty recent development. We don't anticipate additional development at that site. There are a lot of what are called native growth protection areas that are permanently protecting the natural resources within that development. So there is no potential for future development. That's not the intent of any of these zoning map amendments. For that one, save for the Glenwood Apartments there in the Chapel Hill area, that has existing single family residential zoning. So the existing apartment use is actually legal, it's non-conforming to the existing zoning. So as part of this map amendment process, we had proposed to change that to multifamily residential to provide zoning that's consistent with the existing use. It's going to continue to be owned and operated by the Housing Authority. The city has no intention of doing anything on that site. So those are examples of map amendments that are basically to clean things up, to simplify the zoning code, to consolidate some of our zoning districts so that we don't have so many specific zoning districts. So that's a fair number of them. There's a number of other map amendments that are changing to say public, semi-public. Those are either city-owned or partner agency-owned parcels that have existing zoning. They're basically being changed to reflect that they are not intended for future residential or commercial development, that they serve a public purpose. So some of the other, sorry, I got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but just wanted to clarify that towards the beginning of the meeting. Some of the other changes is we provided hyperlinks within the table of contents, which is on page 93 of the packet, to include capital facility plans, Basically, we are not a full service city, so we rely on partner agencies and special service districts to provide things like sewer service, water, electricity. Fire district serves Lake Stevens as well as surrounding areas. So we are reliant on these. So we need to acknowledge those within our comprehensive plan and basically adopt them by reference. For example, the Lake Stevens School District has a separate board, and so they adopt their own capital facilities plan. So for the period of 2024 to 2029, they adopt that plan, and then jurisdictions that are covered by their school district. So Lake Stevens, unincorporated Snohomish County, and then a small part of Marysville are then required to adopt that plan by reference. So we are required to review that, to evaluate that, and then to incorporate that into our comprehensive plan. And then finally, just on general changes, there are a couple new policies, 1.1.5 and 1.1.6 that were added in response. Generally kind of Growth Management Act procedural and public involvement requirements, basically just to ensure that we are meeting the letter and the language of the Growth Management Act. So there also were a couple of changes, more than a couple of changes specifically related to the land use chapter, which is chapter 2, and the housing chapter or element, which is chapter 3. That includes updates to table 2.4 to basically reflect the updated land capacity analysis. We had received pretty detailed comment letters from the Department of Commerce and provided responses to them. The Department of Commerce has indicated that they're satisfied with our responses and that it's looking good as far as potential certification. So we've proposed a number of new policies within Chapter 2 to address some of those topics. Specifically related to housing, have included new tables 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3 to basically summarize that land capacity analysis and to provide the required documentation of how the city is going to meet Growth Management Act requirements for providing different types of housing at different income levels and within different zoning districts. Basically need to show which zoning districts have capacity, where you need to bump up that capacity, and how the proposed map amendments or policy changes are going to satisfy those growth targets. And then a couple additional, some additional analysis related to racially disparate impacts and displacement risks, including a figure that's figure 3.12, which is required by the Growth Management Act. And then finally, just a couple of other of the more substantive changes to the document within the Chapter 4, which is the Environment and Natural Resources document. We did receive a number of comments from the public and then also from Department of Fish and Wildlife, specifically recommending some either revisions to policy language or some new policies. So we included several new policies. We revised others, covered a variety of topics, including salmon recovery, hazard assessments, natural resource planning. So those all can be seen within the track changes within the document. And then just other kind of minor additions and revisions throughout the document. If commissioners or the public have specific questions about any of those, staff is happy to respond to that. So as far as the map amendments, which I'm assuming probably brought a lot of you out here tonight. So as the Planning Commission and the City Council have both reviewed drafts of these potential amendments and the analysis that has accompanied this. As I mentioned, the first kind of batch of amendments are specifically aimed to address the city's projected capacity deficits in 2044 for employment and then also for housing units that are affordable at income levels up to 80% of AMI. So the city is required to, as part of the comprehensive plan, to adopt a future land use map, basically that identifies land use designations that we are adopting to meet those 2044 growth targets. And then for those that are new to this process, there's a future land use map, and then there's an accompanying zoning map. And the zoning map is kind of, so if the future land use map is up at the 30,000 foot level, kind of general designations, the type of uses, say residential, single-family residential. You then implement your land use map through specific zoning districts in your city. So that's, say, the R6 zone within the city is a medium density land use designation that has a specific zoning district designation. So the R6 gets into the zoning code, then gets into setbacks, it gets into minimum lot size, it gets into maximum impervious surface. So the comprehensive plan provides the policy foundation for the zoning designations, and then it's the development code, which is chapter 14 of the Lake Stevens Municipal Code, where you really get into prescriptive standards. So that's basically considered an implementation tool of the comprehensive plan. It's required by state law for your municipal code to be consistent with your comprehensive plan. So attachment 5 in the packet tonight is the future land use map, and attachment 6 is the zoning map. Attachment 6 is shown in the packet as basically it has hatch marks to show proposed changes. When it's incorporated into figure 2.5 of the actual comprehensive plan document, it'll just be a clean version of the map. But we did want to highlight the proposed changes, which a number of you are looking at. So you're basically looking for the areas that have little lines crossing, they'll show the underlying, the existing zoning, and then what the proposed zoning is. Happy to pull up a larger map, as we get into the public comment and discussion period of the public hearing, be able to pull that up on the screen to provide additional context if the commission would like. So just a couple of procedural items. So we are required by law and by our municipal code to provide adequate public notice. So we had issued the public review draft back on July 26th. We then issued, basically started doing the public notice for the proposed map amendment. So that included requirements that we send postcards to property owners of any affected property. So any property that is proposed for a land use map amendment or a zoning map amendment, as well as any property owners within 300 feet of any of these affected zones. I would imagine a number of you probably received those postcards. We're also required to post land use notice signs throughout the city, basically along the perimeter of the affected areas. So hopefully some of you saw some of those as well. Tried to find kind of prominent spots to be able to make the public aware of those. So that was specifically related to the map amendments. And then we also are required to issue separate public notice for the whole document. So we did the notice of the October 2nd public hearing, was published and posted on September 20th, and then published again in the Herald on September 27th. As noted, the SEPA threshold determination was issued on September 23rd. We are still within the public comment period of that, which runs through October 7th. And then the October 2nd meeting packet. So the meeting packet for tonight was published last Friday on the 27th. And we had hoped to get that out a little bit earlier. And because we didn't, that was kind of one of the major impetus. That was the major impetus for deciding to opt to schedule a special meeting on October 9th so that we could continue to accept public comments and not try to have everyone review the plan in less than a week and get their public comments in. Really the central tenet, or one of the central tenets of the Growth Management Act, is public participation. So we want to hear from as many people as possible. And so I've gone over this a little bit. So this is a type 6 land use application. With the Planning Commission holding a public hearing, making a recommendation to the City Council, who then holds a public hearing before potential adoption of the comprehensive plan. Tonight is the Planning Commission's required public hearing. As noted, we are proposing to have it continued to a special meeting next week on October 9th. The staff report basically identifies there are certain approval criteria when you're proposing amendments to the comprehensive plan that need to be met. Kind of consistency with the Growth Management Act, general public health, welfare, safety of the community. So the staff report that's included in tonight's packet addresses that and concludes that all of those criteria are met. And then, as I noted, we are proposing to continue the hearing to October 9th. So as far as tonight, I promise I'm almost done. We will be opening it up for public comment to allow for oral testimony. The Planning Commission is then welcome to ask kind of any initial questions and begin discussion. I think we evaluate that, the amount of that depending on how much public comment we receive. And then make and approve a motion to continue the public hearing to a date certain of October 9th at 6 p.m. That would be back here at the mill here at Lake Stevens City Hall. And then also there would also be the online component that there is available via Zoom as well. And then next steps, we've already identified some revisions that are needed, including to the 6-year and the 20-year capital facilities plan, which are tables 9.1 and 9.2. Those are included kind of right at the end of the document, the end of chapter 9, which is capital facilities. For the commission, the public is welcome to continue to submit written comments. I can give my email address or happy to chat with you after. I think I have cards here somewhere, maybe in the back. So you're welcome to grab one of those, but I'm kind of the main person to direct those to. We'll be posting and publishing notice of that special meeting. And then kind of following the October 9th meeting, if the Planning Commission is ready, they will be able to make a motion to potentially forward a recommendation to the City Council for them to consider at their October 22nd public hearing. And with that, I'm happy to answer any kind of procedural questions or any general questions from the commission, and then we can open it up for public comment.
Nice. Well,
City question.
Well, before we move on to the public comment, I just wanted to extend my sincere appreciation. These are often pretty quiet meetings here. So we really appreciate your engagement coming out and providing some feedback to the commission, truly. With that, the public comment portion, please come up to the podium. You will be limited to 3 minutes. We'll provide some, like forewarning if things are going a little bit over. But please state your name and your address. We will start with the audience that we have here in person. I can see that there are about 20 people that are online as well.
Do you have the sign-in sheet?
It's at the podium.
Yeah, grab that and hold those out.
Does anyone else from the audience need a copy of the staff report and everyone is zoning out? And I'll come around to you.
Need another sheet.
Right. Okay.
Should I ask about,
Talking about the same topic. That they don't just regurgitate the same information.
Right. Right. And just one thing of note for just the hope for a degree of brevity to if you hear similar comments that you might have, certainly emphasize that. But once we've heard one comment, just to if there's anything else that you would have to address, that would be ideal. I'm a school teacher. I'm going to do my best to decipher some of the handwriting on here. All right. So the first, and again, this when you come up, please state your name and your address. The first one on the list, I have Niall Arkush. Thank you. And you can adjust the mic as well. Thank you. Oh, yes.
Who's on deck next to there?
You can.
or I thought
And
that,
and Niall, and I'll have Randy Dickin. You're kind of in the batter's box now, so if you want to come on up, and you'll follow now. Thank you.
No, Ed, we actually thought that that was just signing in to just be here,
Okay.
but I've got plenty of questions.
Yeah.
So Niall Arkush, 1905 99th. So first, when it does take effect, how long after will it be classified? Would it take to go into a reclassification for tax assessment purposes, like for going from a residential to commercial? How long is that going to be on December 31st when you guys are required to report? In that?
Yeah, and just to clarify on the public comment, it's generally intended more for comments as opposed to a back and forth, but the commission can direct staff if they'd like them to respond to comments.
Gotcha.
And those are things, these are specific questions that, outside of the public hearing format, I'm also happy to talk to you about. I know that we chatted briefly
We
earlier
did.
today.
Thank you. Yes.
But yeah, it's generally intended to provide comments. And then the commission does have the discretion to, ask for staff to respond to specific comments.
Okay. Yeah, no, and I understand the growth need in the area and the diversity and all that. With that map, adding 4,915 units in the next 20 years is 245 houses a year or units. If people do not sell out in that area or change, like, is the city going to then purchase other land to expand to be able to meet that need? Or are you required within the city limits to actually have this many units within the city limits? I mean, are we looking at that many places here within that? That would be another question. Sorry. it's
Yeah,
more of a
and we're
comment than-
trying to keep from setting a precedent of, yeah.
Sorry.
Most people have questions.
Yeah, like,
I think
it
might be helpful. That seems like an overarching question.
Yeah.
I have about.
If you can address that. Yeah.
Yeah, did you want to finish your comments? And I can, yeah, I think that would be a pretty common one. I'm happy to touch
Yeah.
on that one.
and then I
but
guess for an actual comment, I have two. Like, I hope as this growth happens, that the expansion of 20th and that going down to the trestle and the trestle gets fixed way before this increase of all of this. That would be my first comment. Fix the traffic and the trestle, please. I'm sure everybody has that same comment. The other one is the sidewalks. You've added bus routes in areas that are residential that do not have sidewalks. And you have large buses going up and down these streets, 99th being one of them. And yeah, kids, dogs do not have a safe place to walk with giant buses driving by. So, thank you.
Uh,
All right, thanks.
Right. And Randy Dickin, you're good? All right. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, guys. We got David and Jess Otis. And after that would be Jonathan Daly.
Hi, I'm David Otis. I live on 9006 12th Street Northeast up in Frontier Village. I really came with some of the same questions that she had. My comment would just be if we could get some clarification on how this is going to affect us in the long term in our specific area. So if there's going to be change to whether that's going to be apartment buildings coming in or how our neighborhood is going to change, I would just like some clarification as we go forward and learn a little bit more about how this area is going to grow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jonathan, excuse me, Jonathan Daly, 1027 89th Drive Northeast. I'm living in the area that's going to be potentially affected by the MUN, I believe it is, to R8-12 zone. I apologize in advance. I did not have time to review the impacts of that on my neighborhood, but I want to stress the importance of leaving single-family homes in small neighborhoods intact. While we do need large multi-family residential units in perhaps several other locations in the city, we also need to preserve those suburban neighborhoods. I used to live in Seattle on Lake City Way, It's a very urban area. I chose to move to Lake Stevens. It offered me a suburban opportunity, a suburban lifestyle, single-family home, a yard, a garage, a driveway. I had none of those things in Seattle. So I urge the commission and the city to strongly protect those single-family homeowners that cannot necessarily afford to move elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I don't know if they're maxed out. All right, let's move to Shelley Sanders, please.
It does help, anybody who's at the mic, it does help if you really speak into the mic, so.
So
Okay.
if anybody else here lives on Parker Drive and wants to go for it, where I live, go ahead.
I'll go. I have some questions, but I know you can't answer them, but. Just things that you can put out and tell me.
Again.
My
to
name
the-
is Renee
nice.
Bond. My address is 2314 Hartford. I live in the brick house. My backyard is Levitt Canal. The city doesn't take care of the property next to me, so it's totally overgrown now, and so you can't even see the culvert. I have fish that go in the stream in back of my house. Nobody's taking care of it. In the 10 years I've lived there, I have talked to, the city has hired surveyors twice. The surveyors that I've talked to said, this isn't buildable land. It's peat. You can't put septic in, or not septic, but sewer. You can't put anything in. I've had the tribe out, the tribal people. And I've had the conservation people out 6 times. They said, this isn't buildable land. It's sinking. The land is sinking. Trees are falling in the ditch. My neighbor had, you guys tried to dredge on the other side of, across the street from me. And I told them you shouldn't do that. They did it anyway, and 5 trees fell. 1 fell on my neighbor's house, who still has the tarp on it. Nobody's helping them. This isn't buildable land that you guys are trying to build on. So if you could please tell me how, I mean, you can bring in soil, you can bring in rocks, but it's gonna sink sooner or later. So are you putting low income people in these houses that are going to sink, that are going to fill with water? I would really like to know how you're going to fix this. They couldn't fix it in Marysville. Kellogg Creek sunk, and it was horrible. I worked at the phone company when that was going on. And so I would really like to know, I mean, where are these fish supposed to go? Because right now, the city hasn't even cleaned the ditch, ever. We've had to take the trees that have been in the ditch and pull them out ourselves. I had a tree that fell, and I had to have somebody come out and cut it out of the ditch, but I couldn't touch it because even though the property was mine, it had to stay in the wetlands because I wasn't allowed to go out there. So I'm not understanding. And plus, I'm in the unique position where I have people that walk up and down the road all the time because that's where they bike and it's their recreation place. They're mad. They're not happy. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Sean Mulvey.
Questions already, my comments already been.
Thank you, Sean. Connie McCoy. Thank you, Connie. Penny Johnson. Okay, thank you, Penny. Sage Johnson. Hey, Suzanne Quigley. And after Suzanne, we have Kevin as well. Okay. Thank you, Suzanne.
Hello, Commissioner, and thank you for your hard work. There's a handout that you should have been given today that will help to clarify my comments. And my address is 1029 Springbrook Road, Lake Stevens. Tonight, we'll be talking about the industrial area property that my husband and I own at 12829 27th Place Northeast. I'm bringing to your attention some map errors that are persisting throughout a lot of the documentation that the city is sharing in this decision-making process. And I know how hard it is to move through such a complicated process. And if you don't have accurate information, things just get even messier. So I'd like to bring your attention to the first page. On the left, you see the yellow rectangle that identifies the property that we own. And on the right side is just the blank outline of the Lake Stevens industrial area to give you some perspective of what we're talking about. And these are all from McKinsey report that are based on Lake Stevens City and Snohomish County information to build these maps. On the second page is the first error I'd like to bring your attention to. Recently, in the sub-area planning section of the McKinsey report from 2023, there is this series of wetland designations, including completely covering over our property, as you can see by our yellow rectangle showing our property being within the midst of this amoeba-shaped wetland. The property that we own is a historic farm. It does have some wetlands and it runs along Catherine Creek. It's beautiful. We've been trying to replant some native growth plants that have been gone since the farm was built, but it also has buildings and it's not all wetland. Neither is the adjacent very industrial business right next door to us. On the next page, we discovered another error, which is the parcel map that shows where septic systems are. And all of the indications in blue show that there are septic systems on these parcels. As you can see, our little gold triangle, rectangle is not shaded blue, but indeed we do have a septic system in it. So that's another area to note that is in error. And in addition to having a septic, and we have a farmhouse that we are renovating. And on the next page is just a sampling of the partial list of both city and state permits that we have gotten for, you know, wells and electricity. We just installed a bathroom, washer and dryer. So a lot of the property is very usable land for businesses, just like the adjacent businesses next door to us, even in the event of some beautiful wetland property that would want to be protected. This is a issue that keeps on creeping up every time we see a new plan in the industrial district, including, if I could just have 30 more seconds.
Yes.
I appreciate it. In the next page is a screenshot of one of the documents that was presented to the City Council in May of 2023 when the marijuana expansion discussion was happening. And indeed, again, we see in this pink circled area, that is all has hash marks showing complete wetland. And we have tried to work through staff to get these corrections done, and we haven't been successful. And I'm concerned that in this complicated process, if they're not corrected, it's kind of a domino effect. You don't know really what you have in the industrial area to know what you can use for businesses, what should be protected because it's perfect for nature. And so I share that with you. So my plea is to please take a look at this with staff and correct these incorrect information. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Suzanne.
Hi, I would also like to thank the commissioners today, and I would also like to thank the last speaker, Dr. Quigley, super eloquent. My name's Kevin Quigley. I live at 1029 Springbrook Road, and I'm not allowed to speak to this issue today because I am phenomenally unpersuasive. And I think it's because I made a mistake 40 years ago. I'm embarrassed about it, but I went to law school. And it's just not made me successful. Everything Suzanne has shared with you today are comments I shared in the public process all along, and none of them ever got through. Now, I have one additional submission to you, since I can't talk about the sub Suzanne's raised, and it's a picture from the council meeting, one of the maps given at the council meeting on 5/23, 2023. It's called option 1, but all of the options, option 1, 2, and 3, propose closing Hartford Road. In addition to not being a good lawyer, we owned land on the other side of Hartford Road, 5 acres. We had to sell it to the city because every one of the proposals was to close Hartford Road. I couldn't even get in the comment period, hey, can you give me one proposal that doesn't close it? Even if you're going to have 2 that do. It scared me so much, I sold that property at a $30,000 loss. I would cry, except it would be embarrassing. But the other thing is, and this is probably more important than anything, is if you look at this map, this is what went to the city council. There was option 1, 2, and 3. You can see this creates all sorts of new zones, including the blue ones, a maker startup zone. And I could not get from the city what's allowed in all of these zones. Not only did I ask the city during the comment period, then I sent something in through the public disclosure period, through the public disclosure request, and I was told, no, we can't disclose that to you. You have to talk to planning. I asked planning again. I wrote to the mayor. I wrote to Russ. I wrote to the planner in charge. We cannot be putting, I don't think you want to or ought to put out maps like this that we pay public money for and not explain to the citizens what these different zones mean. And in this case, it's particularly important because some of my neighbors were told that this was about expanding marijuana cultivation. And I'm not even saying I'm opposed to that. I'm saying I'm opposed to not telling the public. And when I, with 2 law degrees, can't get the city to tell me what's permitted and what's not permitted, then I'd say the rest of the public's in pretty rough shape too. Why does any of this matter? Because as you pointed out, public involvement is critical to the whole process, but also, as you all know, you're playing with live ammunition every time you come to work. So if somebody decides, you know what, I think a good idea to adopt one of those options, it would be logical for you to assume that these options went through a public comment process, but they didn't. So my pitch to you is please, please go for full disclosure, bring the public in and get comments, do proper maps. We'll have a better process, and I know that's what you're all dedicated to. Thanks very much for your time. Sorry to go.
Kevin. Hey, Tammy Dela Cruz. Passing, thank you. Lee Dyer. Lee. And following Lee is Gina. If you have anything to add, thank you.
Lee Dyer, excuse me, 1732 Vernon Road. We just found out about the proposed change. It is kind of adjacent to our property. And I don't know if that's going to be high density, if it's going to be low density, but I would echo the comments of a prior speaker who suggested that you actually keep single family residential as single family residential and not mixed use kind of a proposition where you're mixing apartment buildings into existing single family neighborhoods. The apartment buildings that I've seen go up are squished in. There's not enough parking. They're 4 stories high in what should be a suburban, more open community. That's again, as another speaker said, that's why we came here 20 years ago, right? Lake Stevens has changed dramatically. The population has increased dramatically, and all the problems that come with that are everywhere in Lake Stevens. The sidewalks issue that another speaker mentioned, even where there are sidewalks, people aren't using them. They're walking, they're biking, they're running in the streets, right? We have too much capacity, too much population for the capacity that we have. I see development everywhere without proper infrastructure development to support that. No road lanes added. I mean, from what I can tell on the map from where we're at, it looks like you guys want to put in apartment buildings right there on Lundeen, shunting out on Lundeen, when we already have a traffic issue there. And depending on how many units you're putting in there, you're talking about dozens, hundreds of cars. I don't know how many you're putting in, but with the plan that what I've heard tonight, thousands of units. I mean, are roads being increased? Or is lane capacity being increased to take the traffic capacity that's coming with that? I don't know, right? And I haven't heard it addressed, but I would hope that you'd add lane capacity and other infrastructure to support it. But already, you know, you drive around some of these places and you look at these apartment buildings and it's like, holy smokes, where are you parking? The housing development up there by Hawkeyes, you've got people parking in the street there because there's not enough parking capacity in that development for the people that are living there. And in some places on that street, it's not safe. They're out into the street at the, you know, at the end of that. So, you know, you guys are intelligent. You've been planning, you're professionals at some of this stuff. I presume you would plan for that. Another comment I have is about the Growth Management Act that was cited repeatedly in your presentation. As I understand it, when that was adopted, it was to put a cap on unmitigated growth. And it seems to me it just became a land grab with every municipality getting to the absolute borders of their territory without preserving the environment. So please consider that.
Hello, I'm Gina Dyer. I live at 1732 Vernon Road, and I have basically some areas of concern that I'd like to make comment on. The first one is, again, the quality of life within Lake Stevens. We've seen a lot of growth since we moved here in the year 2000. And again, we have people that are walking on the roads, very unsafe. We don't have enough sidewalks. We don't have enough lane capacity for the commuters. So for example, if we are growing, which we are growing, we need to have the state come in and fix a trestle, give us the lane capacity. Highway 9 needs to become an actual highway, so we need to have that lane capacity for that. We need parking capacity at these locations that we are building. I understand that there are government and state regulations for how many cars you're allowed to have per unit. Please take the maximum allowed by Washington State Code. So instead of having one apartment with only one car, you actually can have your one apartment with 2 cars. Because what happens is when people can't park near their residences, like their apartment buildings, they end up parking in the street. And it's really unsafe, really unsafe. The other one is, my concern is protecting our unique biodiversity that we have in Lake Stevens. We have eagles, we have salmon, we have native growth protection areas, and we also have wetlands. We need to do everything we can to make sure that these are identified appropriately, back to my neighbor wanting that to have happen, but also to protect them. The unit area, the zone area near us, there are eagles that nest there. I don't know if they're still on the endangered list or not by the federal government, but I know that they are still on a watch list. So please make sure that we protect our unique biodiversity. The other one is ensure sustainability. Please, when you are building, make sure that the capacity you are adding does not destroy our environment further and add to environmental destruction. So please make sure that the infrastructure is necessary, is in place. We have the appropriate sewer, electric, data, things like that that will ensure success, not only for when that developer leaves, but for everyone that's left living here for decades and generations to come. I also want to make sure that we're looking at the growth logically. I know that we have our goal of 2044, but please don't just try to grow everything at once. Build whatever the units are left all at one time. Let's try to carefully space these out to minimize the impact to communities for our infrastructure, sustainability, and our biosystems. Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to comment.
We've got Robert McIntosh, followed by Joyce Towns.
Just a quick comment. When we received your little cards, it wasn't very plain of what they were telling about. I had one of the neighbors come by and say, they're tearing our houses down. They're taking our houses from us. And that freaked me out because my daughter lives at 9006 10th Street Southeast up at Frontier Village. And could you please just for us idiots or us ones, please layman terms, so we understand. Thank you that you're not taking her home. My daughter's home. Thank you.
It's Robert McIntosh here. Pass. Thank you, Robert. I have Liz Davies. She didn't. All right. Follow back up with her. And Debbie Sewell. That's right. Okay. Are there others in the audience that would like to address public comment? Anybody else? Yeah, step forward, ma'am.
Sally Jo Sebring, 1023 99th Avenue Southeast. So just a little bit of clarification. I think you probably read quite a few comments from me. I'm pretty much at peace with the numbers and how they come out and why we need to do it. I'm not crazy about, especially about the ones by the trestle. That just doesn't make sense to me. I know our land capacity is limited. I wish there was someplace else. That just doesn't seem like a great place. But the other main thing is, which I think we'll get some clarification when those 6-year and the 20-year capital facilities program gets corrected. Because right now, the plan is that the zoning from 20th up north to like basically 15th, 13th, well, no, up to 15th would be on 99th would be changed to multifamily residential. There's a bus there. It's great. It's great to have a bus, but like my neighbor mentioned, kind of a way neighbor, but it's a little bit scary. I mean, I'm glad there's a bus, but it's not a road that's really made for the kind of traffic we have. We've had, just for houses that have been built in the last probably 7 to 8 years that empty onto 99th, not including the ones that empty onto 20th. There's been like probably 250 houses put in, and traffic mitigation fees for those. As far as I know, none of those traffic mitigation fees paid for any improvements on 99th. At least I haven't seen any improvements that I can think of. So the capital facilities plan doesn't have any sidewalk improvements in the 6-year plan. It's sometime between now and 2044. That is way too long to not have sidewalks if you're going to put multifamily housing. I understand the frontage would be improved by the developer, but there's still probably going to be some parcels. And so especially if South Lake Stevens multi-use, whatever that thing is, from Highway 9 to 100th, I just don't even understand why we're building something there that we send pedestrians and bicyclists across the roundabout at Costco across Highway 9. I mean, that just doesn't really make sense to me. Right now, it looks like that's a higher priority than sidewalks on 99th, because that's apparently in the 6-year capital plan, unless that's a mistake. And 99th is the south end of 99th is not until, we don't know, not in the next 6 years. So sometime in the next 20 years. So I would encourage us to put funds, whether they come from traffic impact fees that are going to be coming in, or moving us up somehow, so that if we're going to change that to multifamily housing, that within the next 6 years, as that stuff gets built out, that there's some sidewalks, at least on one side of the street. So, thank you.
Be good. We'll get to you in just a moment, sir. Liz Davies. Great. Thank you.
I'm Liz Davies, and I live at 1233 Frontier Circle East. I'm here just to say, I looked at this and I thought, I've already discussed with you guys about a sidewalk down a dead end and taking 30 feet of my property. That was a concern in July that we all met. However, I'm looking at this and I think of due process. And I too am a school teacher, and we have due process, and we also need to be very transparent. And I feel that tonight there's no transparency. We need to be transparent. We need to lay it out so people understand. And I got to be really honest, I don't find some of this very logical. And I get I I teach in Kirkland, so I have a 3-hour commute. However, I'm going to let you know, there's lots of development in Kirkland, in Woodinville that is going on. I'm also looking at the people that get displaced. Where do they go? Financially, where are these people going to go? How are you really thinking of where these people can afford? We have a housing issue. That's statewide. That's nationwide. That is not just Lake Stevens. I also am very looking at not only displacement, but we're passionate. I've been in Lake Stevens 30 years, and I've done that commute for 30 years. We need to hear the people. And I feel that you smash things through, going through. I'm looking at the new sidewalks up by the middle school. There's a measurement that is wrong. You have to veer off and the lanes are smaller. That measurement is wrong. If you go back, you can see it. My question is, we need to be transparent to the people. You know, you guys really need to listen. People are being impacted. These are their homes. We have lived for 20, 30 years. You must listen to us. And between the taxes and how are we going to be impacted? We lose sleep over that. Please hear us. Thank you for your jobs, but listen to us. I think people need to be heard. Thank you.
And sir?
My name's Randy Dickin. I live 1905 99th Avenue. We live on the corner of 20th and 91st. Wait, 99th, sorry. 99th. And you guys already had a whole housing development put in on our road on both sides of the street and towards Highway 9. Both sides of 20th, we now have new cars coming through with the whole roundabout because they couldn't go across and nobody usually came up the road. But on 20th, everybody comes up that road and the residents now are putting signs out saying, you know, people need to slow down because they go racing up that road and they go racing down our road and there are no sidewalks. And there's, you know, all these kids literally playing all over the place up and down our roads and getting close to getting hit. A lot of garbage is getting thrown down our road also for whatever reason. I don't know if it's because it's on near the corner, but there's no sidewalks all the way down to almost Costco where all these people are coming in. There's nowhere for the kids to walk anymore to go down to the parks and all that kind of stuff. So I would think that that is a major concern as far as safety goes for everybody in that whole area. But that's all I got to say. I just want to make sure that sidewalks are really unnecessary.
Thank you.
Hey, any other comments in the room before we turn our attention? Yes, sir.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak up. We live in 7330 20th Street, Swan. So one of our
And
property.
your name, sir? I'm sorry.
My name is Balaji, last name Konde, Konde.
Thank you, sir.
So there is a change in our property. It's like from a multi-uses to a multi-family residence. And at the same time in that property, there is a Everett Water District sewer line and water line is there. So with that, I would like to understand, or I would like to have a comment saying that what is the reasoning behind on changing from that multi-usage zone to multi-family residence and how the city will help to expand the sewer and water line to that area. Today, there is no sewer line and water line to that one. It's been taken from the Everett Water District to that houses. If you want to expand, there is no water line. Thank you.
Thank you. What is it's off 20th? Right, okay. Right. Any additional comments in-house here? Yeah. Yes, ma'am. You can bring that down. Yeah.
Okay, since I was the same height back in the 80s, this is the last time I lived in a stick home. I haven't lived in a stick home except for the first time since then, 10 years ago when I got married to my husband. We lived out Sumas and the Canadian Daughter would fluctuate, go up and down. And we always knew when it was good because Abbotsford's right across the street, well, across the border, I should say. And the cars would get all the way back down to where I lived. We had to sell because of the process that Bromley's the only grocery store in the town wanted to buy our area and put in a mall. Because Bella's Fair was only open, what, 3 years at the time? We were forced to sell. And the only thing my parents could do was move us into a motel. Not a motel room, mind you. The apartment next to the office, because we managed it. Went and lived there up until after high school even. Never lived in a stick home since then, either double wide or an apartment. And to know that the city of Lake Stevens, that I've always considered to be an upper class, high-end lake town, is gonna put a bunch of apartments in it is really sad, because you get nothing but a certain type of, not everybody, but a certain type of people that rent. And it brings in a lot of traffic, a lot of bad traffic. Like you see, you know, we have townhouses that live on the end of 10th Street by the park that you guys now own. You see the traffic. They're so stupid. They have clear plastic bags. You can see the pill bottles in there, and it's a bunch of drugs. And even in the apartment that I rented in Mill Creek when I had housing and I made sure it wasn't in Everett, my daughter would come in bringing needles. To bring in a bunch of apartments in a home where people come, it just seems like it'd be a filthy way to dirty up the city. And on top of that, you've gotten so much growth, because I remember when there was a car wash and not a Walgreens. There's just so much growth that no one has any parking, sidewalks. My daughter takes the bus. She doesn't drive. She has severe anxiety. Last thing I need her having is a panic attack on I-5. But to just continually add something that isn't, I'm just grateful it's not another restaurant, but to add an apartment complex where there's multiple people and there's no driving, it's going to be worse than the 2 roundabouts on 9, because that car flipped over the second day it was opened. It just would be bad.
And what is your name, ma'am?
Oh, it's Shelley Johnson. I live on, I said my address, right? 9015 10th Street Northeast.
Thank you, Shelley.
I got one more thing, now that I understand that it's more of a comments.
All right, go ahead, Niall.
questions.
Yeah, so that was really good. Thank you. Because yeah, we have Section 8 housing that borders our property. Like we have 6 properties that border us, and 2 of them are Section 8. Most of them are rentals. But with that point about the needles, doing yard work back in my garden, have had them throw needles over my fence. I don't know why they're hiding or whatever, but you do bring in that element. You know, I'm out there gardening and all of a sudden, you know, there's a fresh needle right there as I'm digging up in the soil. Could have stabbed me, right? You know, those kind of elements come in. So, I mean, it's not, I know you can't, you know, you can't see or tell what people are going to do, understand, but when you have the high density areas, you do bring in a lot of that. So being very mindful at what areas and how to properly zone that and how to control it, make sure you have the right monitoring, you know, as this is growing, to not only bring in the right kind of roadways and sidewalks and all of the infrastructure, but also the police force and in enforcing, making sure that we have enough of the fire hydrants for the fire stations, that they can also be there. But to bring in this kind of amount of people, and you do need to enhance the police department, have patrols in especially in some of the areas that you know that those are the activities. And then the last comment that I have is these roundabouts. There are roundabouts here that you can't even drive around. Okay, so the one at Wendy's, I have a truck, right? I have a truck. And I'm moving stuff and I'm in, you know, construction and I'm moving stuff around. Like I can't get my truck and trailer through most of them. I have to drive over them. I am forced to drive over the roundabouts because the vehicle, there's just not big enough. So how do these delivery trucks getting to these businesses, how are they supposed to get there? they have to also drive over them. So it's kind of a waste of money and our taxpayer money to put in these ridiculous speed bumps, basically, for us to go over. They're going to be ruined very, very soon because we're all forced to drive over them. And for what? And then I love the comment about going across that Highway 9 and these roundabouts, and how do you walk across? How do you bike across? How, I mean, how do we safely get around to cross the street when there's so many accidents? People don't even know how to navigate them. Nobody was taught that, It's like, here you go, figure it out. Yeah. So anyways.
Yes.
And Debbie? Yeah? We'd love for you. Yeah, come on up.
So my name is Debbie Sewell. I live at 1830 Vernon Road. And a lot of people here today have made some very good comments. I'm embarrassed about some of the comments that other people have made. A little bit about myself is personal, but I went through a divorce and was within 24 hours of being homeless twice. Now I own a home that's worth over $1 million. The stereotype of apartments is absolutely appalling. There's nothing wrong with apartments. It's people. Do we need more apartments? Yes. Do we have a lot of apartments? Yes. Are we growing too fast? Yes. Safety is the primary concern, and I hope that the city keeps that as the focus. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments in-house? Yes, sir. Please state your name and address.
Steve Arbaugh, 2206 71st Avenue Southeast. In the name of transparency, you should include a list of all the developers and builders that helped you devise this plan. You should all know whose input you've taken to heart. And in the area that, as you come up Cavalieros Hill to the first light, to the southwest is an area that is single-family housing. And you've got that zone for multiple and also high density, low income. And if you're really interested, and that area should be left alone as single family housing. If you're really interested in high density, low income, rezone the building where the city hall is, build it 20 stories high and house them there. It's environmentally less of an impact. They can walk to stores because most of them will have time to do that. But your plan doesn't do anything for the people that live in the areas that you're planning to rezone. It basically destroys the area they enjoy right now.
Thank you. Any additional comment? Yes, sir.
My name is Randy Foreman. I live at 12201 21st Street Northeast, Lake Stevens. There's a lot beside me that's been a vacant lot, and I understand the city's trying to grow and trying to have amenities for people that are here in the town, and I can appreciate that. But my neighbor's property was proposed to be 86 some townhomes by the city just a few years ago, and they basically took 10 feet of each side of his property for sidewalks and trees to be able to put in a road that could be accessed to those 86 townhomes. And now that plan has been completely changed again. And this is part of your new plan for the area that's now going to become commercial. My question, like many other people here tonight, how is this going to affect us, those that live in that area? How is our taxes going to be affected? These are questions. My comment is, what about people who live in these single family homes that the zoning is changing? How are they going to be dealt with in plans that constantly change? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Oh. And
My name is
name-
David Otis, 9006 12th Street. I got up here a little bit earlier. After hearing what everybody had said, I just wanted to give a little bit of perspective from me and my wife. We live in the Frontier Village area. It is pretty much just single-family homes there. I believe that it's being proposed that that could be rezoned. I was told by one of my neighbors also that we're under threat of being displaced, is what I was told. This is my first house. This is me and my wife's first house. This is something that it was an investment that I made in the area, you know, saying, I want to be a part of Lake Stevens. I want to be in the Seattle area. I want to be able to, you know, enjoy my family, the park that's there, everything about this area. If we are being displaced, that's going to, I don't know how that's going to be dealt with. I don't know how I'm going to be able to get to my job. I don't know what's going to happen. And with this being, to me, an investment property, I'd like some clarification, you know, as I'd said earlier, just on going forward, what are we doing? What are we expecting to do? What as residents can we do to find out more information? And who do we speak to? What are the plans going in? Thank you again for your time and for letting me talk.
Okay. Right. We'll turn to any public comment online.
Yes, we do have a couple. I have a question from Bill, I believe it's Wallace. He's the pastor at Hope Church on 20th Street and Highway 9. He says the proposed change for our land is to go from R8 to commercial development. The only thing we might do on our land is add a new building for our worship space. Does the commercial development designation allow for us to continue as a church and potentially build a larger facility? He does not need permit information because he knows that's a separate issue.
Separate. Okay. Right. Was the only comment
No,
online?
actually, we have a couple others.
Is anybody that's live? Yeah.
No, they've all
Okay.
just put it in the chat.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Can we receive a copy of
Yes,
Yeah.
I can send that out as part of the
And
minutes.
so that people online can hear you, make sure that it's really hard when you zoom in to hear.
Thank you. Do you want me to read the others? Okay. What about our schools that are maxed out was one of the questions / comments. And everything is falling on deaf ears. They don't care about our community and who is in it. That is another comment that was put in the chat. And one last comment just says truth. Yes.
Right. No, any more comments internally here? Okay. All right, with that, let me go back to, again, our sincere appreciation, like I said, I think it was Mr. Quigley earlier. Mr. Quigley earlier just, talked about how important it is for us to all have buy-in, to be a part of the process. Know that this does not fall on deaf ears. Many of the concerns that each of you have are ones that we've also brought up in our commission meetings, which then gets passed along to the city council for their own internal deliberation. But as Lake Stevens residents, each one of us share a lot of those similar concerns. We do appreciate you providing that voice of reason, each and every one of you. Thank you so much.
Chair Davis, can I echo that just briefly?
Yeah, go ahead.
Jennifer Davis, not Connor Davis. I just wanted to also say that I've been on the planning commission for 12 years now, and having this level of engagement I can't even tell you how important it is and how touched I am, and how when I walked in the room, I was floored. I just want you to know that we are you guys. The only difference is that we just come here once or twice a month and talk about the same issues that you've raised tonight. And when I tell you that we wrestle with the idea of the environment and how special it is here, the physical world, we talk about affordability for our seniors and our children who are growing into young adults who can't afford to buy here. We talk about the protecting people who already live here while planning for the people that are going to be coming and the state laws that are mandating that we talk about it. I mean, I wish that I could encapsulate that in just 2 minutes to tell you about the meetings that we have. We have heated debate a lot about these things. And so it means the world to the community that you guys took time to come and talk to us. And I just really want you to know that it's really frustrating for us to listen to the comments and not be able to engage in conversation, especially when topics like displacement come up. That breaks my heart to think that anybody for even 1 second thought that they might lose their home because of this process. So it's really hard. I think, I don't know if you guys would say that, but it's so hard to just sit here and listen, and we take our notes and we do talk about it, but to not be able to engage in the dialogue is really difficult. So anyway, thank you for coming and sharing.
And if I may, we volunteer our time. We are not elected to do this, nor are we paid. This is something that we do because we are school teachers, or we do commute to Boeing. In my case, I own a business on Hartford. My husband and I do. And this is, this is where I live and make my livelihood. So the fact that I got engaged happened to be about our economic growth, but there are other commissioners that are engaged in this because of transportation issues or because of our school districts and how it marries with our residential needs and a myriad of other things. So I wanted to say that. I also wanted to say that there are things that the city can control and there are things that it cannot. And some of the things that it cannot have been dictated. David keeps using the word allocated. That's a very nice way of saying that we're being told what to do by Olympia. And there are some bills that have been passed that make it so that we are not able to stay away from some of these distasteful topics. And it frustrates me to no end to know that we are being lumped in the same city structure as some of the other areas that we all know and don't want to become. And then lastly, and I'll just leave it at this and then we can have our own discussion, but there are some land use issues in Lake Stevens, and many of you brought them up because of our wetlands, because of our topography, that are unbuildable. It makes it so that there are places that you cannot build. And so if we are being mandated to provide housing, not tomorrow, we're not building apartments tomorrow. And I don't know any of the developers, I'm not one of them. So, but if we are being mandated to build this housing for them, those that will come, you can't go out if you don't have the land. So the only way you can go is up. And I hate that. I don't want it next to me. I don't want it next to any of you, but it is going to have to happen. We simply don't have the land to do that in Lake Stevens. So it is a balance and it is a delicate dance. And I'm sorry that some of you have had any angst, because that is certainly not the intent of what we're doing right now. What we're doing is trying to get feedback and certainly leaving this open so that we can make the most educated decision on what we plan to send to your city council, whom you do elect. So that will be where I park that, because then I'm going to get in my high horse and start talking trash about people.
Can I ask that either Mr. Levitan or Russ, can you just address very high level, like these concerns about displacement? Again, the postcard wasn't layman's language, right? So if we change something from R6 to R8 to 12, or if it goes from single family residential to multifamily residential, can you just talk very high level? What does that mean? What are the actions that are or are not going to occur due to that designation change?
Okay, I'll go ahead and field that, since Dave sort of went through the presentation and explained it one way. Maybe I can explain it a little bit differently. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Russ Wright. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Lake Stevens, and I've worked in this community for the last 14 years. So when we do public engagement, some of the things you've already heard this evening, there is a certain format that we have to provide our postcards in some certain legal terms. So beyond that, we do try to provide as much clarity as possible. And in this case, we've even developed a map tool that really did help break that down even into more layman's terms. But getting back to the question that Commissioner Packard sort of just brought forward, what does this mean to the communities? One of the things we started this meeting talking about is we did some housekeeping. So a lot of the neighborhoods that have been discussed, like the neighborhoods around the Frontier Heights Park, that's a housekeeping. That in the planning effort that happened in 2012, there had been a vision at some point that that area might become a mixed use district. It's always been a single family district. So this current zoning designation change actually takes it back to where it was prior to 2012. And a lot of that logic is about the displacement. We really have to think about some of these neighborhoods in the city now, and we recognize the value of neighborhoods like the one adjacent to Frontier Heights Park, and that the need that it provides to this community. So that's why that zoning change is actually going back to a single family designation to protect that zone. Others like the one on Vernon that were mentioned, and the Timbers development up in the northern part of the city, those had very unique designations that came in through annexations with the county. So those were contract zones. And what was built in both of those were single family developments. And so again, we're trying to streamline our zoning code and really reflect the actual built product. And so in both of those cases, they're single family neighborhoods. The one property on Vernon that I think is being referenced, it's actually going from a contract multifamily zone, which in the past it had multiple properties. Now, because of the critical areas, the steep slopes, the access to utilities, there's one house on that property, and that's all there's ever going to be. So again, some of these things we're trying to do is housekeeping, and it does just what you're saying, trying to honor the character of these surrounding neighborhoods or true up that. So there's never an idea that we're going to displace. Another thing that's been sort of talked about tonight in general, if the commission will give me a couple of minutes, is the idea about you're going to build this. The city doesn't build projects. We review, we are the regulatory agency to ensure that there's compliant. And as you've heard about through the introduction and through the staff report tonight, we have to go through this effort to plan for the city. And I know what this group's excited about is the colors on the map, and that's the most personal to everybody. But throughout the rest of the document is where we talk about all of these other big topics that were brought up. We have a capital facilities element that tells you how are we going to construct the infrastructure to tie back to the housing types in the city over the next 20 years, including sidewalks, roadways, et cetera. We have a public services element that says, how are we going to coordinate with the school district that we know they're facing a huge influx of students? And does the housing type that we have meet the needs of that group? Are we working with our sewer district? Are we working with our water district to make sure that those utilities are expanded? So it is a very holistic approach, and the decisions I won't say that we make, the recommendations that we make to the Planning Commission and on to the City Council, again, they take all of these factors that you're talking about tonight, the different types of neighborhoods, the housing needs we have. It was mentioned we have a housing crisis, and that's something that we all recognize as professional planners and have to provide recommendations on where are some of the best locations. In this case, we're not in Everett. We don't have a hospital. We don't have, the social services. But what we can offer is we can put higher density housing towards bus lines and in areas where there are commercial places, grocery stores, restaurants, points of access. So we are very cautious in where we think about creating or recommending some of these changes. But again, like the commission did, I would also thank you. This is going on about 18 months with this process. And I'm sorry all of you weren't able to participate earlier in the process, but we have held several open houses and done community surveys online. So we appreciate your voice this evening.
I wanted to resolve And how many times do they have to tell them, no, can't do it? Until they stop. How many times do you guys, can you keep rezoning? Because it seems like that's what you're doing with your.
So that's a conversation I would talk to you about after this, or David and I, so I could get more specifics on your question. But again, we'll turn it back over to the commission at this point for their deliberation.
Yeah, can I, so what I think I'm hearing is, and yeah, this is what I think I'm hearing, is somebody lives in a single family residential, right? It's zoned R6 or something, and then it just got moved to a multifamily residential. So I think what I'm hearing is the concern that the city is going to wipe out all the single family homes in that area and put in multifamily apartments, or that the only thing that can be built in that area is apartments, right? So if for example, there's a designation of R8 to 12, right? That doesn't mean that they have to be built at that level. It just means they can be built up to that density, right? So can you just?
Yes.
That's what I think I'm hearing. Okay, so can we address that
Absolutely.
concern?
Thank you for that clarification. So yes, the zoning that gets established doesn't mean that anybody is obligated to build up to that intensity, or that there's a plan that the city's working with any developer or anything like that to go in and make a play for people's property. So if they're living in their homes, they get to continue to live in their homes and make the improvements to their home under that zoning designation. There was a comment about what does it do to taxes? That's sort of the other side of this displacement. The tax code comes from Snohomish County, and that's based on the use type. So if it's a single family home, your taxes are assessed on the structure and the land at that zone. It wouldn't be until some point in the future, if and when it were ever changed to a commercial or a multifamily use, that change occurs. So there isn't a master plan that any property becomes redeveloped. They continue to be lived in by their current owners, and it's their choice to choose what they do with their properties in the future.
And Commissioner Packard, if I could just note, just circling back, there've been a lot of comments about the east side of Frontier Heights Park. So that's currently zoned mixed use neighborhood, which actually allows for commercial uses. It allows for apartments above commercial uses. So that would actually technically be a multifamily residential zone. It's actually being proposed to go to R812 specifically because we understand that it's a supply of unsubsidized, kind of more affordable housing. And so that zone and that zoning map amendment actually would, technically probably it would be considered a down zone. And it's because of concerns about potential displacement. Just to clarify, R812 is not a multifamily residential district. It's primarily intended for small lot, single family residential. Like most of our other residential districts for the last 4 or 5 years, it allows for middle housing as well. It does not allow for large apartment buildings. It does not allow for other types of multifamily residential uses beyond duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, which then the city through its municipal code has an infill housing ordinance that evaluates things like impacts and visual impacts and consistency, and making sure that, that it recognizes the existing residential development. So I'd be happy to go through the map as far as, areas. But again, on the displacement, we have, I think, 3 larger manufactured home parks in the city of Lake Stevens, and manufactured housing and mobile home parks are an outright permitted use in the multifamily residential zone. So in an earlier iteration of the map, we actually considered changing those mobile home parks to multifamily residential to provide them zoning that was more consistent with the existing use. So it would be an outright permitted use for what's already there, versus now it would be considered basically a legal non-conforming use. It's not consistent with the existing zoning. We considered that, and then we thought about it from a displacement perspective. Hey, if you assign multifamily residential zoning and somebody acquires that mobile home park and they think it would be more profitable to build a large apartment complex, then that has the impact to displace lower income residents. And so we scratched that one. We got rid of that one, even though it would have helped us to meet some of our supply specifically because we were concerned about displacement. So I wanted to clarify that RA 12 seems like a big number, but that's still primarily a single family residential zone. That we have a limited number of residential zoning map amendments proposed to increase supply of multifamily residential. And those are primarily along 20th Street within the 20th Street Southeast Corridor sub-area. And then there are a few others that there's one down here that's an existing subsidized housing development is multiple units on one parcel, which isn't allowed within single family. So it would provide that multifamily residential zoning that is actually consistent with the existing development. So, building on what Russ said, we're not looking to acquire properties through eminent domain. We're not looking to get rid of our supply of unsubsidized affordable housing. We are very cognizant of those impacts, and they've actually been considered in development of the map amendments. So.
All right. So these are still like.
Can I sneak in one?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Okay, sorry. This has been a long process. I think as we saw on that first or second slide, I think we've been working on this for about a year, it feels like, perhaps even more, with many opportunities for the public to come out and talk. And I certainly appreciate everybody turning out tonight. And I got to say, I share in a lot of these concerns. I slog through the roundabouts every day and I see, the carnage that can happen in them. It feels like every other day there's a car off to the side with a fender that's dented in. I make my way down the trestle, I head over to work and I slog my way back. And when on the weekends, I find it difficult to go for a 1 mile run around the block without either going on somebody's lawn or out in the street because there's no sidewalk. But as we go through these processes here and as we look at, what the state has put upon us, I think it would be helpful just at a very high overview, Russ, if you could give us a sense of what House Bill 1110 means in terms of what the city is compelled to act on. And how much of this in this document, this 400 some odd page document, is being directed to us, to put it mildly, from the state.
Sure. And I'll probably have David chime in as well. So the state legislature, as they go through their process, they come up with, in the last couple of sessions, pretty significant changes to the Growth Management Act as well as to the Permit Review Act. And so with the changes to the Growth Management Act, we, as the word's been used tonight, compelled or mandated, or we've been assigned targets. It has changed how the city has to plan, and that includes adding more middle housing as one of the big targets. And middle housing is defined, the definition of that has changed as well, anywhere from duplexes to sixplexes. But essentially, it's planning for housing in between full-blown apartment complexes and single family. A portion of that now assigns duplexes on, or allows for duplexes on every single family lot in the city. It also allows for the construction of 2 accessory dwelling units on every lot in the city. So these are a plethora of different types of housing that we now have to think about how to accommodate and to make sure that our rules will meet those. But the big thing is looking at our growth targets and the zoning. And we've gone through an analysis. It doesn't really show up in this document, but we thought that just by looking at ADUs and, now we have to allow ADUs on every lot. Can we count those to our capacity? And then we go to Commerce, the Department of Commerce with that approach. And they say, well, really, in the Seattle market, an ADU is still going to be at 100% of your median income. So, wah. So back to the drawing board. So in short, I'm not trying to be glib, but we do take seriously the legislation that comes through, and we do our best to try and incorporate that into our comprehensive plan. And so I've talked about the housing elements that were given to us, but along with that, there become revised requirements for critical areas. There become revised requirements for stormwater management. There are climate change elements we have to integrate, sustainability, as well as racial and economic disparate impacts. So those are things we have to recognize and try to accommodate through the state legislation into our local planning processes, which sometimes they look a little clumsy, you know, when you just sort of see, as we're talking about tonight, the changes to your land and what does that mean? Because those are very personal, but does that address your question?
Yeah, I think the other question I would have though is under these directed changes from Olympia, if I own a piece of property, if I'm a homeowner in like an R6, right, just a regular residential neighborhood, is there an option for Lake Stevens to say, no, we don't want duplexes to be permitted in that area?
No, there is not an opportunity for cities to say, no, we won't take duplexes and we won't take ADUs at this point.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow on to that question though? But that doesn't mean that the person who owns that property, if they want to build, has to build a duplex. It just means they have the option to.
Correct.
Through the code. So if your neighbor, you know, if my neighbor decides to sell and whoever comes in, they have the choice to build a duplex on that property. But that doesn't mean they're going to, right?
Right.
Just means that option is available to them. So if I'm in a neighborhood where, yeah, the zoning has changed to higher density, again, that doesn't mean the city's going to come in and wipe anything out. It doesn't mean that we're going to force anybody to build something or take your home. It just means that the person who buys that property next can build up to a certain designation. And that's their prerogative as the homeowner. Your job as the city, our job as the planning commission is to try and create a reasonable strategy that aligns to the growth management dictates, but does it in a responsible way that still protects as much as we can what we want our city to be, but doesn't mandate anything.
That is correct.
And all of those things still apply. Sorry to jump in, but all the things still apply. The setbacks, the mitigation, you're impervious. If you've got too much concrete, you can't put in another parking space, which makes it so that you can't do, in theory, another ADU on your property. So all of the other things that Department of Ecology force you to do when you build are still in play and might negate building there anyway.
I just wanted to like drill it down even further because you guys are this is all hitting you for the first time, probably all the terms and all the discussion, but just to make it super, super clear for everybody, for everyone in the back, if you own a home and you're happy there and the land use designation changes, that means nothing changes for you unless you want it to. You stay in your house, nobody's taking it from you, you just keep living your life.
Yes.
Did we say that? That's what we said.
That's a yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
There, we love our planning commissioners. There are some wonky responses, but at the end of the day, that's a yes. Okay. All right. No.
Are you going to open it up to comments at the podium again?
Yeah.
Is there anyone who hasn't
Is there
commented?
anybody that hasn't commented that has a comment at this point? Yes, sir. Please come forward.
I just want to clarify that your comment about if you're in a single family residence.
Oh, I'm sorry. If you can, just address at the podium, please, sir.
My name is Bryce Seek. I live just off Caballero. And you mentioned that if you're perfectly happy in your single family residence on your property, you don't have to sell, you can stay there, which is perfectly fine. And you have neighbors that decide to sell. And now they're in a multifamily residence zoning. They can build an apartment complex right next door to you. And that totally changes your way of life. My comment.
That is what we're battling. And that's my angst is your angst.
Where do we get some follow-ups and
Yeah.
decisions? Where can we go to get more information to observe the progress and what's happening?
So, well, public comment does stay open for the next week, leading up to next week's planning commission meeting. In terms of any correspondence, things be emailed to the city. In terms of staying apprised as far as the progress, Russ, can you speak to the internal process for notifying and engaging residents?
At this point, communication with David would be the best course of action. We do have a website that has lots of information about this, and we'll do our best to assemble some responses to the comments we heard tonight, not probably individually, but grouped as topics for part of your discussion. And I guess one thing we haven't really heard, though, is the discourse from the Planning Commission tonight. If you have any additional guidance for us with the draft revisions that you've not seen.
Really, it seems like the unanimity here in the audience is, I hear lack of transparency. What I think it boils down to is lack of clarity. To have kind of like almost a bullet pointed approach. The concern is the use of eminent domain. That obviously that is not going to happen. For this to just be broken down into layman's terms that is easily digestible for the average resident of Lake Stevens, that seems to be would take care of nearly all of the concerns here in the room.
And who has your ear during your commission meeting? What builder, what developer are you listening to?
I can promise you, sir, that there's no developer that has our ear. I teach middle school social studies. I mean, I have the ears of 12 and 13-year-olds that want to go for a run in running club. As soon as school ends, I go and coach cross country every day after school. I coach basketball, I coach track. I run with the kids through the rain every single day during the winter. That's honestly, it's very frustrating to hear that you would suggest that there's a developer that has any kind of, that I can, well, yeah, I mean.
I can step in on that and say, we have in the past had citizen initiated projects that come before Planning Commission. We've also had city initiated projects that come in front of the commission. This is neither of those. This is an overview for the entire city. So this has nothing to do with any specific builder, any specific lot, any specific portion of the city. This is the wide-reaching overview that we, in most cases, are being told we need to put together to be compliant. That is it. There is nobody in my back pocket.
Then gets approved. Then does it not get submitted for proposals for potential redevelopment to contractors outside the city?
Just like, and the city would need, in my experience, it's just like any other city. If you have a developer that wants to develop something in Marysville or Snohomish, it's going to be whatever Snohomish's plan is.
But once all this plan gets approved, what I'm saying is, does it not open up for potential?
Just as much as it is now, sir.
Building for contractors to come in, bid on a potential project.
But just as much as it is today.
Yeah.
Once it's approved, how long would the listen go back?
That was a question that was asked originally, and I think that that's a valid question to answer in front of the group that has been here today.
So the next step is, obviously, we've talked about the Planning Commission is going to hold a second hearing, keep that open. They'll make a recommendation to the City Council. It's passed by ordinance, and an ordinance takes effect usually 6 days after the close of the public hearing and adoption by the council.
This So that would be nearing the end of October if they decide on their
October, early November, yeah, depending on if they have one or two hearings.
And if it gets extended, it has to be done by the end of the year. But if they decide to extend it for additional public comment or anything like that, then they could, because they've got a window there.
Mhm.
Thank you for the clarification.
And ma'am, if you'd like to step forward. Just to come up to the, if there's a comment, please come on up to the podium.
Debbie Sewell, Vernon Road. There is valid concern that people are worried about being displaced. So maybe a suggestion would be, if you are so knowledgeable, to talk about if that was to ever happen to someone, and depending on the type of property that they have, they would be entitled to Federal Relocation Act due process, which is very extensive in what is required. Notice, money, aid. So maybe giving that information would ease some people's mind if they were ever in that type of a situation.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Well, again, the public hearing portion will, I'm sorry, the public comment portion will remain open for the next week. We have a commission meeting this coming, or I'm sorry, a week from today, 6 p.m., same bat time, same bat channel. We'll be back here. With that, we'll turn it over to sir.
I
Okay.
think that would be.
Yeah,
safe.
so we'll have a motion to continue.
Did you have any other internal discussion about the amendments, or did you want to wait until next meeting?
I'm gonna hold my comment until we meet again.
I took notes this evening and I may
Yeah.
send an email for some clarification between now and the next meeting. But I have some thoughts that I'll hold.
I just really want to process all the comments we heard. This was so valuable. I really appreciate, I do appreciate it.
And I will make the motion that we hold over the public hearing for the next week to commence at 6 o'clock next Wednesday.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, and with that, it brings us to commissioners' reports. We'll start with Commissioner Packard.
I don't have anything today.
I have nothing for me to.
I've been the only one to not thank you for coming, so thank you for coming.
And for anybody that is able to, the North Lake Cross Country Team has its first home meet this coming, I'm always going to make a plug.
A little self-serving.
We're moving the our home course to Lake Stevens Community Park. If you guys are at all able to, Monday, 4 o'clock, come and cheer on the young Bulldogs. It's a great crew of kids. They're literally running their hearts out. No, but yeah, we again greatly appreciate y'all coming out. And with that, we'll turn it over to the planning director's report.
I have no report tonight. Thank you.
Report. All right. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you again, everybody.